Hey guys, Lumen02. I'm going to be doing a very quick deck tech on this deck you have in front of you, and then going into some pre-modern content on the aforementioned. And this is Bargain Storm. So, Bargain Storm is a very interesting deck. And pre-modern, just to preface, before I go into the deck, what the format actually is Scourge and earlier cards. Basically, Ice Age to Scourge, and all the core sets in between as well. Which means that basically it takes off where old school 93-94 leaves off, and then goes all the way until the border change in the cards. You'll see almost all of my cards have the old borders, unless there's some that I've missed just due to collection limitations on MTGO or version availability. Anyways, the way this deck works is it's a Storm deck. However, it does not use Tendrils of Agony because that card is unfortunately or fortunately likely banned in pre-modern. So Bring Freeze and or Hunting Pack are really the only good Storm conditions that you can use to win in this format. Tendrils is banned, as is Mind's Desire. So neither of those you're able to use in this format. That said, how does this deck work? Well, the engine of the deck is really, honestly, it's probably more of a misnomer. I would say this deck is more of an Ill-Gotten Gains deck than it is a Yawgmoth's Bargain deck. Bargain is very nice, and oftentimes you'll win with it, but the card that I think is more operative to the deck's operation is Ill-Gotten Gains, because you don't have Yawgmoth's Will, which is also banned in this format. So you're probably seeing a trend. A lot of the degenerate combo cards are banned, but the ones that remain are still just generally good enough to make this deck function. Yawgmoth's Bargain is essentially the necropotence of this deck. You'll note that I have 3 of these, 3 Brain Freezes, and generally 4 of everything else, with the exception of a couple careful studies. That's because, generally speaking, this deck wants to operate like it only has 1 Yawgmoth's Bargain. Intuition is kind of one of the other engines that allows you to find the operative pieces you need, whether it be Ill-Gotten Gains, Yawgmoth's Bargain, or the actual WinCon Brain Freeze, because realistically, you don't want more than 1 Bargain, you don't want more than 1 Brain Freeze in order to win the game. However, having all 4 of the Ill-Gotten Gains is great, as long as you have the mana to cast all of them and then recurse the mana. So to go over how the deck operates, you'll see some of it in practice when we go to the games. Ill-Gotten Gains, like I said, is the engine of the deck. What Ill-Gotten Gains basically does is you exile the card itself so you cannot continually recurse it, and then everyone discards their hand and returns up to 3 cards exactly from their graveyard. Up to 3 cards from their graveyard to their hand. So you cast a bunch of rituals to include Dark Ritual, Cabal Ritual, possibly Lion's Eye Diamond, Lotus Petal, Duresses if you need them, Brain Freezes, Intuitions, Bargains, or other Ill-Gotten Gains, i.e. Ill-Gotten Gains you have not cast, but possibly discarded. You make a bunch of mana with your rituals. Generally speaking, after you've achieved thresholds, you're making 5 for 2 off of Cabal Ritual as opposed to 3 for 1 off of Dark Rit. You make a whole boatload of mana and then loop Ill-Gotten Gains until you generate enough storm count to cast a lethal Brain Freeze on your opponent. Ostensibly, you may also need Tormod's Crypt because Gaia's Blessing is a pretty common card in this format that's utilized in the multicolor Oath decks, as well as some control variants will also use Gaia's Blessing just to stay alive. So it is running 1 main deck, Tormod's Crypt, which also works as hot tech against Reanimator strategies, but generally speaking is intended pretty specifically to get rid of Gaia's Blessing so you can mill people out. That said, you have some hand attack in the form of Duress, careful studies in here as well, which is just decent-ish filtration because a lot of the best cantrips are banned, to include Brainstorm, which would also be played in this deck. Although not at its best, although you do have 4 fetch lands and a couple different shuffle effects to include Intuition, as well as a pseudo shuffle effect in the form of Sleight of Hand to get rid of at least one of the cards you put back on top. That said, you generate as much storm as you need off of Ill-Gotten Gains and rituals. Eventually, cast a Brain Freeze. And Yawgmoth's Bargain, in my opinion, is kind of a secondary effort that just enables you to get after the specific cards you may need if you do not have Intuition to generate the storm count and get after the specifics that you need inside the deck. Now, I did not build this deck. I stole this deck 100% from the digital space on PreModern, I believe .com is the name of the site. So I won't claim to have had a hand in building this. I have redacted the sideboard a little bit, but not a huge amount. So Hydroblast is in here realistically to get Pyroblast, and or sometimes against extremely aggressive decks you may need it. Chain of Vapor. This is probably one of the best cards that I have in the sideboard. Like, as far as how this deck operates, I tend to sideboard this in a decent bit because I think Bargain Storm has a decent target on its back, and folks know that it's coming, or folks know that it's out there, even if it's not played all the time. And having Chain of Vapor to get like problem cards like Arcane Laboratory, Aura of Silence, whatever, is very, very, very good. Because if there's an Aura of Silence in play, you generally speaking can't win, because generally you want to be able to use your LEDs and your Lotus Petals for a reasonable rate. And if Arcane Lab's in play, well, you're just dead. Like, you can't deal with that main deck. If someone's main decking it and they're a crazy person and they just assume that there's going to be at least half the field in Bargain Storm, well, they're probably going to win a lot of games if they get that card. Cabal Therapy, this card, is just additional hand attack if you need it. In specific matchups, it's nice to sideboard because you can generally tend to be able to understand hidden information better after the first game and how you assume your opponent will sideboard. In some ways, the sideboard in this deck, because it's a pretty aggressive combo deck, is set up in a lot of ways like Dredge or like any pure vintage or eternal combo deck, where the sideboard is templated to beat other people's sideboards and other people's main deck hate cards. So Cabal Therapy's in there specifically for that. Xanthid Swarm, great against counter magic, obviously. If someone's playing Draw Go, which is not very common to see, but if they are, this just show stops them if you get it down in turn 1, because they're probably not going to have time to get a Nevin Yaros just down to deal with it. Moment's Peace. This is just a time buyer against like the very, very aggressive decks. This can buy you the 1 to 2 turns you need, and it's cool to have Rebecca Guayart in the sideboard because it's just great art, right? You also have a secondary win condition, which is Hunting Pack. So if an opponent becomes untargetable due to Ivory Mask or something along those lines, Hunting Pack can still finish them off. This is a very inefficient card, but when it works, it's pretty hilarious because you make, a trillion 4/4 beasts and then just beat them down with it. There's also an additional Tormod's Crypt. Oftentimes you can use the singular Tormod's Crypt, 2 to 3 times with multiple copies of Ill-Gotten Gains to get rid of 1, 2, or even 3 Gaia's Blessings. But sometimes you want the second one just so you can ensure that you find it a lot easier, and or so you can use Intuition to get it in the graveyard, so you can use your Ill-Gotten Gains to get it back just a little bit easier. So that's how the deck is constructed, guys. Very, very light mana base at 16 lands, although it is using LEDs, Lotus Petals, and then a ton of Dark Rituals and Cabal Rituals. So don't let the deck's land count fool you as far as its mana consistency. It's a very mana-rich deck. It's basically just mana, card draw / filtration, some hand disruption, and 3 win cons is really what it is. So it's, that's kind of all it does. Alright guys, that said, I'm going to go on a quick pause, and then I'm going to show you some gameplay of this deck, because I think the deck's really sweet, and I got to kind of play an interesting matchup, and I got to do some, I got to make some interesting plays with the deck, and some interesting player rounds with the deck. So, quick pause guys, I'll be right back. Alright guys, back. This is game 1. Playing against Makuto86. Actually, I think he recently took second in a European PreModern competition in Germany. So he generally knows what he's doing. This hand looks fine. It's a little slow, but it's got Sleight of Hand, it's got Intuition to get after some stuff, and it's got Ill-Gotten Gains, so that if I find my rituals, I can make a lot of mana with the hand. That said, it's not on the highest percentile of draws for this deck, but it's also not bad enough to throw back. Finding land there was kind of suboptimal, but I'm going to get to Sleight of Hand here. And this is what I see on top. I ended up taking the Lion's Eye Diamond because Lion's Eye Diamond is going to combo the best with my Ill-Gotten Gains. And as far as card selection goes, I could take Sleight of Hand, but Intuition I think is going to give me the selection I need based on the remainder of my draws. So I take the big mana here. They have another island, and now I'm thinking in my head like they probably have some sort of counter magic, but they end up playing on a Phyrexian Dreadnought and stifling it. So this is probably some sort of English breakfast / Dreadnought Stifle, or StifleNaught deck. StifleNaught is Dreadnought in general is a bigger problem because my life total is important so that I'm able to get after Yawgmoth's Bargain. So I see this card and I'm like, well, I have to Intuition on my turn to build up Storm Count and to get after and to eventually get after Will. Unfortunately, I'm a mana short here, so what I have to do is wait till my draw step. I end up drawing another Ill-Gotten Gains, which is pretty nice, so I can make more mana. And I'm also at account 7 in my graveyard after casting this Dark Ritual, so I'm going to be able to Cabal Ritual immediately following. Opponent makes some considerations here, but I know they don't have discard. I know they have a Stifle in hand, which I am capable of beating. So I end up casting out the Cabal Ritual. I go back up to 6 mana, cast the Ill-Gotten Gains that I got from my draw step after sacking the Lion's Eye Diamond to make blue mana. The plan here is to, again, make a bunch of mana and then use Intuition. Use Intuition to find my Ritual. Now, I make a play error here. I should have actually gotten Dark Ritual as opposed to Cabal Ritual because my hand size isn't large enough. So I can't Intuition before I Ritual because then I would have to sack the LED in response to Intuition. I could not sack the LED in response to Intuition. So I end up with Xaxes on mana as opposed to netting 1 mana off of it, which is a mistake on my part. I go through a lot of iterations in my head, but I know the only set of cards I can really get realistically, unless my opponent misplays, is Yawgmoth's Bargain. And then I need to, because my life total is a little lower, my chances of hitting are pretty low. I hit the win con. Right now what I'm looking for is a Ritual and more Ill-Gotten Gains. I hit a Duress, which actually is not bad because it could allow me to get the Stifle if I hit the remainder of the cards I need. But basically what I needed is a Ritual effect here, or numerous Ritual effects, or like LED, correction, not LED, another Lotus Petal, and a Ritual effect would do it, or Lotus Petal Cabal Ritual would do it, so that I can go into another Ill-Gotten Gains loop and get the Duress back to Duress the Stifle out of their hand after doing a couple Ill-Gotten Gains loops, and then also gotten back the Brain Freeze plus the Lotus Petal plus a Ritual if need be off of the floating mana, or double Lotus Petal plus Brain Freeze would also do it. My storm count would be high enough at that point to actually successfully combo. The unfortunate part is, and going back on this game, like I do think the 1 mana did matter because it increased my ounce. So if I had a black floating right here plus the Lotus Petal and I drew into a Cabal Ritual, which there are less Dark Rituals in my deck than there are Cabal Rituals. There's 3 Cabal Rituals left. Then I would have been able to go like crazy here and probably combo them out. But the other half of it is I could have also looked to Intuition on their turn to save the mana on my turn, and that was another possible line of play when they cast the Phyrexian Dreadnought and stifled it. I'm sorry, when they attacked with Phyrexian Dreadnought, I could have gone for that line of play. The only problem was I had to use a Lotus Petal as a resource to do it. But I think at the end of the day, it was probably more correct to go for the Intuition on their turn. That's a learning experience of the deck. So I'm going to go on a quick pause, guys, and we'll come back for Game 2 in this matchup against StifleNaught / Breakfast Combo. Alright, guys, back. So pretty light sideboarding. I ended up putting in an additional Tormod script and an additional 2 Chain of Vapors. Now, Chain of Vapor is possibly really, really bad, but I've been burned a lot by hate cards on this deck, and I was just like, I just don't want to get had by a random hate card, even though the chances they have it are pretty low. The additional Tormod's Crypt is just because, one, it's a good synergy against graveyard-based decks, like I assume they are from the cards that I saw in their yard during the Ill-Gotten Gains. And, if they sideboarded into Gaia's Blessing, I don't want to just get hosed, so I want to have a couple copies of it laying around. This hand's great. It's a lot better than my first hand. Now, what it does need to hit is land, or more mana sources. So they play Island, say go. I draw the City of Brass, which is pretty nice, and I'm just going to play Draw Go as well. I could try to go for something here. I'm not going to be able to do anything here. I don't have enough mana. If I had double Dark Ritual, I could cast a Yawgmoth's Will and start going crazy. They have a pretty obvious mana leak here. I go ahead and just say go to them. No correction, I actually do go for the Duress. I'm going to build up graveyard size. So they go ahead and mana leak here. It's hard to tell if they have more counter magic in hand or not, but I think you do try to at least see what's going on over there. They tap out for a Volrash Shapeshifter, which means if I can hit enough cards, I can try to go for lethal next turn. I end up, hitting another Chain of Vapor, which is kind of punishing me because it's not looking like they have an exceedingly hateful sideboard against my strategy. The one downside to this style of deck is that Phyrexian Dreadnought, because they're running Stifle, means that Stifle can be used effectively against my Brain Freezes. They go for an attack here. I just go ahead and use the Tormod's Crypt to make this thing a 0-1 again, and if they want to discard a card, I can bounce the Volrash Shapeshifter. They go ahead and cast a Ground Seal. I could bounce this at end step, but I'm not quite ready to go for it yet. So I Brain Freeze myself. I also want to Brain Freeze myself. The reason I want to Brain Freeze myself here is because I want to build up my my graveyard size for Cabal Ritual. What I don't want to be discarding are a ton of ill-gotten gains. I'd like to actually draw those or find them. I only discard one, but I do lose of note 3 of my Lotus Petals here. Find a land for the turn. End up casting a Chain of Vapor. They accidentally, I think, copy it, but I don't have anything they can bounce with it. I cast Ritual, cast out Yawgmoth's, bargain with 1 land floating. Find Ill-Gotten Gains, which is pretty nice. Dark Ritual, and it's time to go crazy here. So, Ritual, Ill-Gotten Gains, getting back Ill-Gotten Gains, and Ritual. Ritual again, netting a mana each time, so I'm back up to 2 black mana. End up finding Lotus Petal, Cabal Ritual, and Lotus Petal. And at this point, I'm just going to go start drawing. It's best to play your cards out, generally speaking, in between draws from Yawgmoth's Bargain, because you're using Lion's Eye Diamond, which means that sometimes you'll trap cards in your hand where you can't use them because you draw into an LED and you do need the mana off the LED. This is not like it's going to be a mana short hand. I do find the duress I need, and I'm able to stifle them. Or correction, I get it back with Ill-Gotten Gain so I can get rid of their stifle. And then I put a Tormod's Crypt into play, which I put into play solely to template around Gaia's Blessing in their deck. And I cast a Lethal Brain Freeze for, I believe, 51 cards. Yeah, 17 times 3, I believe, 51. So they start discarding, and I assume because they're allowing me to discard, maybe they have multiple Gaia's Blessings. But I believe after a time, they just go ahead and pack it in and concede. Which, could tell me one of two things. It could tell me, like, hey, they don't have Gaia's Blessing, or they wanted me to see a portion of their deck so that I think they don't have Gaia's Blessing, and then maybe I sideboard out the Tormod's Crypt. It's hard telling. I ended up leaving the Tormod's Crypt, and I didn't change my sideboarding plan. I even left the Chain of Vapors in because they did have certain hate cards that I had to be able to deal with, to include the seal. The ground seal was problematic because if we read, where are you at, buddy? I believe if we read this, it says, returns up to 3 cards from their graveyard to their hand. I don't know if this technically targets. I don't know if ground seal actually does it. I'd really have to read up on this. I think I have to ask a judge, right? Because each player discards their hand and then returns up to 3 cards. It doesn't say 3 target cards from their graveyard to their hand, so this seems like it's an effect that probably should be targeted, but it's not. I guess it's not technically because you never actually you just go through and choose them. It's kind of weirded, oddly. Ill-Gotten Gains is. I'm curious to know if ground seal actually stops Ill-Gotten Gains. That's when I was playing, I just played like I assumed it would. Which is possibly incorrect. Maybe it just does absolutely nothing other than cantrip for them. Interesting. Anyways, so we end up winning this one. We mill them out, and they stop us, halfway through their deck from seeing the rest of the deck. So quick pause, guys, and we'll go into Game 3. All right, guys, back. This opener is pretty strong. It's what it's lacking is access to an Intuition or a Yawgmoth's Bargain. But we have a Chain of Vapor to get rid of any hate that we may need to get rid of, to stop an early aggressive draw that includes a turn 2 StifleNaught, and we have a lot of mana. And an Ill-Gotten Gains. We see an Elvish Lyricist, which is interesting. So Elvish Lyricist is actually more interesting than you may think. This card looks really dorky, but it's actually not bad against this deck. Oftentimes, you don't think that you would want. It's not common, sense generally to disenchant like a Necropotence, or in Vintage Storm, it's not generally good sense to blow up a Yawgmoth's Bargain or a Necropotence, right? Because they'll just draw a bazillion cards and then they'll just do whatever they're going to do anyways. But against this deck, because it's using unrestricted sets of Lion's Eye Diamonds, oftentimes, and Ill-Gotten Gains, oftentimes it can't just draw the deck and just win with that hand. It wants to draw them incrementally. So if they blow up the Yawgmoth's Bargain, in response to some draws, you could draw a bunch of cards and hope to get lucky and not hit multiple LEDs. But sometimes it just doesn't work out where you get the right chain of cards with the life that you have, that you can play them all simultaneously, and not worry about losing value or storm count off of having to discard your hand to Ill-Gotten Gains or LED. Now, that's more so on mana constricted situations. Sometimes you just have the nuts and you have tons of mana and it doesn't matter. But Elvish Lyricist is better than it kind of looks here, in my opinion. The one thing that we're going to see with their play, though, and it's not per se wrong, but they attack with the Elvish Lyricist a lot, which means they're really not going to be able to disrupt my my bargain if I get it down on my turn. So I'm kind of just waiting to draw a duress. Again, it feels pretty obvious that they probably have a mana leak available to them right now. They cast an Impulse here. Not to mention, I can't do anything right now. I can just make a bunch of mana. I can make big mana go nowhere right now with my hand. So I'm waiting for a payoff. There's the payoff. So we find the payoff, and I'm just going to keep on playing out one card a turn here. So I don't have to discard the hand size. And then I'm going to wait for them to make the first mistake or take the first action and go lower on mana. They cast Survival here. I find a Tormod's Crypt, which I'm going to play out this turn just to keep myself alive from any crazy combo shenanigans with Survival of the Fittest. They think about going for it, but then they stop. This deck technically can go off at instant speed, but it's not very likely to do that. It would have to be like a horrendously huge chain of cards. So this is an interesting point in the game. Like, I'm very close to just being able to like play around Mana Leak with the rituals that I have, as long as my opponent doesn't like get wise to it and Mana Leak my first ritual. But if they don't Mana Leak my first ritual, this hand has the potential to make more mana than Mana Leak can actually prevent, or can make enough mana that it can cast Yawgmoth's Bargain without having it countered by a Mana Leak. They go for a Volrash Shapeshifter here, which means to me that they're going to look to set up lethal on the following turn. I draw another ritual here, and this turn I just opt to go for it, because I put them pretty squarely on a Mana Leak. But like I was saying, unless they get my first ritual, I have enough mana to pay for a Mana Leak with Yawgmoth's Bargain and or Ill-Gotten Gains. I ditch my hand, making mana off of the LED. I'm going to Ill-Gotten Gains to build up Storm Count here. They end up casting out the Mana Leak. I just go ahead and pay 1 black and 2 blue, I believe, or 2 black and 1 blue. Go ahead and make a bunch of mana with the rituals. Start drawing. You'll know what I'm playing my cards on as I go. It's just habit because I've gotten burned by LED many times where I had a hand get trapped, essentially because I had to play an LED out and I had to sack the LED to make mana, so I couldn't keep the cards. So I'm very used to just playing cards as I go with this deck. I just go ahead and make more mana. I do have Tormod's Crypt up at this point. What I'm doing here is I'm trying to, one, just build up an insurmountable amount of Storm, and I have Ill-Gotten Gains left in my hand, so if they have multiple copies of Gaia's Blessing, then I'll be able to get the first one with Tormod's Crypt plus whatever cards are underneath it, and then I'll be able to Ill-Gotten Gains back a Lotus Petal, a Ritual, and the Tormod's Crypt, or I'm sorry, it would have to be what? I guess a Petal... Yeah, Petal, Brain Freeze, and then Ritual, I suppose. So I wouldn't actually, it'd be really tight. I wouldn't be able to actually Tormod. I would have to start drawing again if I wanted to be able to Tormod's Crypt again. I'd have to find more mana. Probably like another Lotus Petal, because I've already made my land drop for the turn at this point. But they don't evidently have Gaia's Blessing in deck. But that's what I would end up doing, is I would have, the reason I played it this way is because I wanted to have an Ill-Gotten Gains left so that I could mill them as far as I could if they have Blessing. Tormod's Crypt the Blessing plus all the cards that are, below Blessing. And then, have an Ill-Gotten Gains to get back the Tormod's Crypt plus the Brain Freeze so I could do it all again and possibly get up to 2 Blessings out of their deck and possibly set up for a third. But at this point, I have used up 3 of my Ill-Gotten Gains. So I am playing 2 Tormod's Crypts at this point. So I'd be able to Tormod's Crypt 2 more times, essentially, if they were to have gone that route. That's kind of why I played it this way. I could have killed them sooner with Storm Count, but I wanted to play around, a possible card they could have. Now, that said, what do I think of the matchup? The matchup's kind of interesting. Like, Mana Leak, as you saw, sometimes you just can't keep pace with rituals. If you let the rituals get off early, sometimes it's right to counter the ritual, I guess is the point. Another interesting thing is Stifle. So Stifle is a card that, is in their deck, to enable, an early main deck aggressive combination with Phyrexian Dreadnought. But it's also very good against the Storm deck, and I often found that I needed to play around both it and Mana Leak is basically, essentially the Stifle's hot tech against my deck because, it's not a commonly played card. You see it more and more in sideboards to stop Storm and to stop, I can't think of the card's name, not Entreat, the Angel's Decree of Justice, stuff like that. And you have to see it, stifle a Yawgmoth's Bargain activation in the first game, which I think may have been a little bit hasty on their part, but, I get it. Makes sense to me. Because if I had another, Petal and I had just been slow rolling it to try to, stop them from stifling a Storm trigger, that would have been bad. That said, oftentimes you'll try to play around that type of effect, but Stifle is definitely a trickier one, and you definitely want your duresses. Now, I did cut, I think, one duress out of deck, so I was really banking on, like, generally per match finding at least one of them through Yawgmoth's Bargain or, possibly through Intuition. I did leave 3 because I wanted to be able to Intuition for them. But anyways, very, very interesting matchup. This deck's very, very sweet. As you can see, it's a little more complicated than most Eternal versions of Storm, even Modern Storm. I would say 100-card Storm's probably harder than this, like Canadian Highlander. But as far as pre-modern decks go, I think this deck's very, very powerful. I know right now Yawgmoth's Bargain is on the watch list for banning. I think there are more oppressive cards than it. This deck is probably not the most fun to play against, but it is decently sophisticated in what it has to do, and I think it has enough weak points in its construction or just in how it plays that it's decently easy to disrupt. But if given kind of free reign to kind of go after its own devices, it can do some broken stuff. Now, this is a turn 6 win. We probably had a win on turn 3 or turn 4 if we had not played around. If they had nothing in hand and we had not played around counter magic whatsoever. But this kind of goes to show, like, I think one of the ways you can play around counter magic with this deck. And I'd be curious to hear anyone's thoughts on it, because I'm sure there's someone with a lot more ill-gotten gains or bargain storm experience in PM than myself. I've only played this deck 3 or 4 times. I have gotten better each time at it. I think the deck is very cool. It's kind of an elegant, interesting way of winning with a lot of very notable cards that make this archetype as powerful as it is in Eternal. Missing from the format, I think it adds a couple layers of sophistication to the deck's play, and it's certainly very, very fun. Anyways, guys, hope you enjoyed the pre-modern content. If you haven't tried it out, like I said, it is Ice Age forward to Scourge. So all of the old border cards minus the old school cards. Anyways, guys, enjoy and take care now.